Hear me? Yes, that sounds good. Hey, so thanks so much for having me here. I made a rookie mistake and went to the dentist right before this, so my mouth is a little frozen. So if drool falls out of my mouth at any time, my gums are healthy, and that's really what matters. So here's my objectives for the time that we spent together. So I got about 45 minutes, and I have two things that I want you to walk away with. One is I want every single person in this room to walk out of here understanding how much power you have to affect positive change, not only in this organization, but in your life. And the second thing is I want to teach you at a high level a method and a way of interacting with the world that will allow you to unleash that power. Okay, so that may sound like a tall order, but I am very confident that together we can make that happen. Oh yes, housekeeping. I forgot about this last time too. Slido, so ProDev, the room is appreciative inquiry. For any questions you may have, we'll be happy to create time at the end to answer those. So fundamentally, this premise underpins everything that I'm going to talk about right now. Whether it's in your personal life or whether in your professional life here. We become what we think about. And I'm going to tell you a story from my own personal life that illustrates this in great detail. So about 10 years ago, my wife and the biological mother of my children took her own life. And as a result of her mental health issues, it was a long journey to obviously get to that point that was filled with fear and anxiety and all kinds of really powerful emotions. And because I had very few tools at that time in my life to be able to deal with this kind of stress, I turned to alcohol to try to cope with the stress and the trauma of my own personal life falling apart, watching my wife slowly die, and then the after effects of trying to deal with that. Okay, and here's why I'm telling you this story, is because despite the fact that I hated what I was doing. I knew that I was destroying my life and really robbing my kids of their ability to have their best version, the best version of their dad that they deserved. I kept drinking for long after Cindy's death. And here's one of the reasons why. It's because the only future that I could imagine for myself was even worse than what I was already doing and already hating about myself. So for example, the stories I told myself were, you know what, if I stop drinking, no one's gonna like me. I don't even think I can socialize people if I stop drinking. How come I can't just drink like a normal person? If I admit how badly I need help, my new wife is going to know that I've been lying to her all these years when I said that I didn't. And what that created was exactly what I did not want. So in focusing on fear and focusing on self-judgment and in focusing on negativity, I became fear and I became self-judgment, all of those things. So, and it was not until my wife helped me to start to imagine what a different future could be that I started to break free of what was happening. And it wasn't until that point, it wasn't her getting mad at me, it wasn't her pressuring me, it was her helping me imagine a compelling and evocative future that I wanted to move toward. And that is really fundamentally what appreciative inquiry is all about. So with that being said, so when I was originally thinking about this session, I didn't really realize we were streaming it all over the place. So here's what I was going to have you do. And what I want to do is I want to walk through a practical sort of micro example of this method in action, and I'll explain to you what's happened. And then we're going to go to some real world examples afterwards. Okay, so I would ask you to reflect on this question, for example. So reflect on a positive moment in time, a high point story, an empowering example where you were part of a team who worked exceptionally well together to create wonderful outcomes. So what happened? I would ask you to share those stories with one another, to fill this room with stories. I would ask you to think about what strengths or characteristics did you contribute to making this moment happen? And what's an important lesson you learned from this experience? And within an incredibly short period of time, what would emerge would be the strengths and the characteristics that make exceptional teamwork happen. It would happen, those strengths would emerge so quickly, and that gives us an amazing foundation on which to build. Hey, we know when these strengths are present, great teamwork happens. So how might we figure out together how to do more of these things to create even more teamwork, more effective teamwork in the future? So that's a very small example of what this method is all about. It's empowering and it's energizing, and it brings out the best in people and organizations, and it does it more quickly than any other method I've ever seen. So let's talk about a couple of different paradigms. The one on my left, the problem solving. This is the one we are all familiar with. It's probably actually the only one we're familiar with, which is, hey, something screwed up, okay? What caused it to screw up? How do we stop it from screwing up? And let's get it back to a normative state. Let's take it from broken to fixed, okay? And when you do that, you're constantly focused on what's wrong. A different approach, and this one I'm going to talk to you about today, is appreciating. It's looking for the best of what has worked in the past and what is working right now. It's imagining what could be. What are our highest aspirations for what could be in whatever situation it is that we're exploring together? It's designing. How might we make this happen? What are some concrete ways that we could make this happen? And then it's deploying, which is just really bringing it to life. And I'll use an example. We talk about this a lot when we talk about this work. So about 15 years ago or so, British Airways was having a problem with lost luggage. So they brought in some consultants who happened to be trained in appreciative inquiry, and their original mandate for these consultants was, hey, help us solve the lost luggage problem, okay? That is going from broken to fixed. So solving the lost luggage problem, that would be good. That would be a step forward for sure. But the consultants asked a different question. They said, how might we create an exceptional arrival experience? And in so doing, not only did they end up solving the lost luggage problem, because you can't have an exceptional arrival experience if your luggage doesn't show up, but they created innovations in that space that gave them a competitive advantage in the marketplace. And that is an example of two different ways of thinking about when there is something wrong. Do you go from broken to fixed and pat yourself on the back and go home? Or do you realize that every one of these opportunities, every one of these situations is an opportunity to go from broken way beyond fixed into strength-based innovation? And we're going to look at some specific examples of how to do that. So this work is, predicated on the idea of constantly exploring what causes a human system to be at its best. And if you look back here, you can see that there's many different contexts that can happen. It might be a team, a family, a business, a community, a city, a region, a country, or even humanity. And that is not too high of a bar to set. This work has been used at the United Nations to just achieve things that never would have been achievable using the traditional deficit-based approach. It can also be used even on a lower scale than a team. It can be used in every single conversation that you engage in. So the scope and the application for this work is limitless. So here's what it's really all about. It's almost a relentless search for the best of what was, the best of what is, and the best of what could be. So in other words, it's looking to the past and saying, where were we at our very best? And exploring that through the power of questions, which we'll talk about. It's looking at what is happening right now that is so good that no matter how much we change or evolve in the future, we want to honor, protect, and build on what's working great. And then when we talk about the best of what could be, it is coming together collectively and imagining, again, our highest aspirations for the future. What is a compelling and evocative vision for the future that we are inspired to move towards? Because we move toward the images we most persistently hold in our mind. And the more vivid and the more collectively we've created them, the more they will guide our actions over time. And really, this is also about, we're talking about innovation here, This is a pretty famous quote by these guys, but what matters most is not our competitive advantage at a single point in time, but our evolutionary advantage over time. And what I'm here to tell you is that every single person in here, in every single conversation that you have, can create the opportunity to move forward together, to explore new opportunities, to listen to another person's point of view, to ask better questions. That's what will create an evolutionary advantage over time, is treating every conversation as a sacred opportunity to leave the other person a little bit better off than they were before. So here's the idea. This work is all strengths focused. So when we discover the stories of what is working well and share hopes for what might be possible if these strengths were built upon, we make the impossible become probable. And I'll tell you, when you get a group of people together and you start talking, actually, you know what, before I even say this, let me ask you a question. Who here in the last year has had someone come up to you and be genuinely curious about when you were at your very best? Yeah, well, that was because it was me. Yeah, okay. It never happens. It never happens. And that's like this crazy shame. We're leaving so much on the table, right? So when you get a group of people together and you start talking about people and being genuinely interested in asking the questions that help them reflect on when they've been at their best, they will come to life immediately. Because, hey, we're all our own favorite subject to talk about, and we love talking about when we've been at our best. So not only is that an amazing opportunity to learn some very important things that you can build on, it's a way to bring a group of people to life immediately. So it's strength focused. And appreciative inquiry invites people to design, prototype, and self-organize around the changes they want to create so they can continue to learn, grow, and thrive together as they work towards their desired results. So in other words, this isn't just walking around talking, singing happy thoughts and being all positive. It's much more than that. It's taking what we learn, what emerges from asking those types of questions, and brings it to life in a really rapid way. It's like continually designing new ways of working based on the very best of what's working. And if you want to see a team, again, come together and continuously improve, this is why. This is why it works. Because building on the best of what's working, it's a hell of a lot more fun than always being focused on what's wrong. Oh yeah, it allows us to do real work, and it allows us to do it fast. Allows us to do it fast. I've never seen a method that works more quickly than this. So, because this approach is all based on questions, it's all based on questions. And I think I have a slide in here somewhere. Maybe I skipped it already, but it's a quote from the VP of R&D for IBM. And he talks about how the mark of true genius is the ability to ask all the right questions. So as leaders and as people that work in teams, the better we get at asking better questions, the more effective we will be at finding better answers, okay? So when you hear somebody saying, oh, why can't we? How come that happened? Why did so-and-so say that? There's always a better question that you can ask. So one of the foundational questions of this work is a question that connects us to a shared purpose. There is immense data by Deloitte and Harvard Business Review that says purpose-focused organizations and teams perform at a higher level than those that are not connected to a higher or transcendent purpose. So when we do this work, we always talk about a bricklayer story. And I'm going to tell it to you right now, and I'm going to illustrate why it's so important. So in this fable, there's a person walking down the street, and there's 3 bricklayers, or stone cutters, depending on the version of the story that you hear. And he stops and he says to the first one, "Hey, what are you doing?" And the first one goes, "I'm laying bricks so I can make enough money to feed my family," which is a perfectly acceptable answer. There's nothing wrong with that at all. He goes to the second one and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he goes, "I am building a wall that will stand the test of time. Still doing the exact same task, but with a different meaning behind it. And then he goes to the third one. He says, hey, what are you doing? And he goes, I am building a concert hall that we will fill with music and that will bring people together to share in beautiful experiences together. And when the first and second bricklayer heard that story, they were so inspired by it that it gave their work more meaning and fulfillment. And that's why we connect people to a shared purpose. When we ask people, hey, why is it, if we're in a group of people facilitating a session and say we're talking about customer service, we would ask them, why is it important for you to be here right now? Why does this work matter to you personally? Why does it matter to our team? Why does it matter to our organization? And why does it matter to the world? We want people to think big about why what we're doing is important. And what I'll tell you is if I did this with you right now, here's exactly what would happen. I would give you some time to journal. You would write down your answers. I would pair you into groups. I would get you to share your answers with one another. And you would be inspired by the people that you shared, that you were a group with, and you would elevate your own sense of purpose. It always happens. And the truth is, we have two things that are important here. We have absolute freedom of choice to decide why something is important to us. And it can evolve over time. The meaning of something, of what we're doing, can evolve over time. So when you get around a group of people talking about why what they're doing is important, it elevates everybody's sense of purpose. It happens every single time, and it then imbues everything that comes afterwards with a much deeper sense of meaning. Okay, so we connect to shared purpose. We ask questions that connect us to strengths, right? So let's say, for example, I'm going to give you some examples of this afterwards, but say we might be talking about teamwork, for example. We might say, again, think of a time when you've been part of an experience where exceptional teamwork happened, and then what was it about that? What can we learn about that? It might be, hey, what are 2 or 3 things that are happening on our team right now that are working so well? We want to keep them. But we want to connect to strengths because there is deep wisdom in learning about what works well when we're at our best so we can build on those going forward. So that's the second type of foundational question. The third kind of question is questions that connect us to our highest aspirations. So if we're talking about teamwork, for example, a question we might ask might be, hey, imagine we were coming back here 12 months in the future and we were celebrating the incredible accomplishments of this team, the way you have taken your strengths and built on them to deliver results that exceeded your wildest dreams. What would we be celebrating? And as you get people to imagine their dreams for the future in a way that they have not done before, they come to life and they do it together. It's not somebody telling them what their vision is or should be. It is the opposite of a bunch of leaders sitting in a room somewhere saying, yeah, this is our vision, let's go convince people. It's everybody being invited into the conversation and co-creating that vision together. And people care about what they create. And then questions that connect us to new ideas, which is, it might be, how might we question, right? How might we, build a flourishing team that delivers a customer service that exceeds our wildest expectations? So we ask questions that generate the ideas that we can actually build on to make our highest aspirations come true. But again, this is about more than a method. It is definitely approach. There's tools. Am I working here? There are tools. There are processes that you can go through to facilitate these types of group conversations. But fundamentally, it's about the way that you choose to interact with the world. And I can say from personal experience, I used to be kind of a miserable asshole, to be honest with you. And I am the opposite of that now. I mean, I still might be a bit of an a-hole, but I'm very positive. I'm super, super positive. But it's all about how you choose to interact with the world. Are you the type of person that takes negativity and reframes it and looks for an opportunity? It looks for what you want instead of what you don't. Are you the type of person that knows the power of questions and stays curious no matter what. There's always a better question to ask. It's about how you interact with the world. And when you take this approach and you bring it in to every single conversation you have, this is what I've learned. Your influence and effectiveness in the organization will accelerate faster than you can even imagine. And secondly, you'll have a personal life that is much, much better because you'll be much more effective at building genuine, mutually beneficial relationships that are built on strengths. So innovation, there's lots of different definitions for innovation. So it's a great idea executed brilliantly and communicated clearly. Now listen, there's a lot of processes for innovation out there. There's probably a million. I'm not going to talk about any of those because I actually don't care about it that much. But what I do care is helping you understand how to create a culture on your teams where innovation can flourish, where it is just a natural result of the way that your team operates together, the way that they communicate together, and the way they solve problems and face challenges together. All of those opportunities, or all of those situations, are opportunities to create innovation. And innovation can become a way of life, but it starts by the conversations that we have with one another. So, number one characteristic, some of you may know this, a couple of years ago, Google did a study, and what they were really interested in is they were interested in finding out what characteristics were present in their highest performing teams. So they spent a couple of years analyzing this, and they looked at all kinds of different things, you know, what the teams were working on, demographics, personality types, like everything that you can imagine. And they finally identified 5 characteristics that were present in high-performing teams. And the number one characteristic by far that was present, you put the other ones to shame, was psychological safety. Psychological safety meaning, do you feel safe to take an emotional risk, to put yourself out there, to try something and maybe fail, to bring all of yourself to work? How many people have felt either like an imposter at work, or if you put your idea out there, it would be judged harshly, or that you couldn't really show your true feelings because you felt like people would judge you? Who's ever felt that way? Yeah, I mean, and the people that didn't put up your hand, yes, you did. So everybody has felt this way. And so what I'm telling you is, if you are actively creating psychological safety on your team will perform, all of you will, at a much higher level. The data is there, and this work creates immediate psychological safety. When you get a group of people in a room, a group of strangers, talking about why what they're doing is important, connecting them to shared purpose, here's what always happens, actually. So you get a group of people, they come into a room. A lot of times they don't know what they're walking into. So for anybody that's watched Game of Thrones, they walk in the room looking like White Walkers a little bit, kind of like, just like zombies, like, I don't know what to expect. I'm super uncomfortable. Oh my God, I just want this to be over. And as soon as we ask a question around shared purpose, the room comes to life immediately. I was called into a team to do some of this work to help them define a set of foundational values by which they could live with. In this meeting, the manager told me, my team is completely dysfunctional. Those were her words. The last time we had a meeting, half the people stormed out, which I'd never actually seen in my entire career, but this is what happened. So I'm like, wow, I wonder I know what's going to happen. This is going to be awesome. This is like the most fertile ground for this type of work you can imagine. So we walk in and I ask them a purpose question, and the entire tone of the room changed immediately. And when I asked people to share their experiences, to share their answers, just 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of you, just what did you write down? 4 people of the 5 people said, I just want to feel safe. And the beautiful irony in that is, by them having the courage to say that, they made it safe for everybody else. And then the rest of that session, the rest of the few hours we spent together, was deeply collaborative and connecting. And their manager at the end of it was blown away by what happened. And we're continuing to do work with that team. So amazing story. But my point is, if you do not feel psychologically safe, your team is leaving so much on the table. My mission around here is to walk around talking to leaders. I mean, I'm sick of hearing my own voice talk about this, but this work creates psychological safety, and psychological safety is an absolute imperative for any high-performing team. So unlocking group genius. So here's what happens in this work, okay? You get a group of people like this in the room. The amount of collective wisdom in this room is incredible. It vastly surpasses anything that one individual person might have. So the question is, what questions could we ask that unlock that group genius? And when you start doing that, when you start inviting all of the voices into the room and you start asking questions, the wisdom that emerges is mind-boggling, right? So this work unlocks group genius, and it does it every single time. And if you want exponential results, you need to be tapping into that group genius, because the answers that lie there, they're just, again, exponentially better than anything that any one person could ever come up with. And then lastly, what do you do with that group genius? It's nice to get, all this amazing wisdom that you can build on. Well, you got to rapidly and continually design ways to bring those best ideas to life. And that's where design thinking comes in, right? It's how do we quickly brainstorm? How do we quickly prototype our ideas, in a low capital, like low risk environment, whether it's human capital or financial capital? How do we prototype our ideas? How do we get them out there as quickly as possible? How do we leave behind forever the idea of analysis paralysis and just create solutions quickly and continually? That's what this work does. So it's three main pillars: create psychological safety, unlock group genius, and then design ways to rapidly and continually bring that group genius to life. So I'm going to give you some real examples here. One of the feedback I got in my last session to give some more real examples. So here we go. So I'm going to give you examples on different sort of scales. Okay, so the first one is how easy it is to positively reframe any conversation. Okay, so I was facilitating a session, and a guy came up and he had a Post-it note in his hand. I'm going to put this down so I can demo it. He comes up and he's like kind of got a mad face on, which doesn't happen that often. And he has this blue Post-it note and he goes, he slaps it on the board and he goes, boom, we got to talk to people about the cost of poor quality. I am sick of this. Okay, so first of all, it's obvious that quality is super important to you, right? Like clearly. And he's like, yeah, it is super important to me. Okay, so instead of harping on the cost of poor quality, what if you did this instead? What if you, because this group of people had their customers were internal in the organization, what if you brought a customer or two into your next team meeting and you asked them about the incredible benefits of perfect quality? What if you got them to talk to you about how when they receive perfect quality from your team, how that allows them to serve their customers in a more meaningful and important way? That's this work. As simple as reframing one comment. We had another example where I had somebody come up to me on my team who said, hey, this may sound familiar to every single person here. I need somebody on another team to do this thing for me, and they're not doing it. So can you help? So when I was younger, here's what I would have done. I would have been like, ooh, this is a chance for me to go be a manager. I'm going to walk over there and I get that person to do it. He's going to hate me by the end of it. I'm sure I'll get the thing done, but why aren't you getting this done? This is important. Instead, I thought, here's what I thought is, what is the best question I could ask myself right now? So like number one, I don't know anything about this guy. I don't even know him. I have no idea what his workload is like. I have no idea what his priorities are. I don't know, nothing, right? So what I really needed from him was some advice. I didn't need to tell him what to do. I needed to ask him a question, which was, hey man, we need to get this thing done, and you're a really important part of that. How do you think we might best work together in order to make it happen? And he goes, oh, you know what? I didn't know it was that important. I can do it right now. So he did it. I just asked a question because I was genuinely curious. Okay. And so what ended up happening was the thing got done. Him and I created this nice relationship. I went to his boss and said, hey, when I went over there, the thing got done. I really appreciate that. His boss and I went for coffee. We have a relationship now. It's just a better way of interacting with people and navigating the organization. Okay, so that's another example of how to do it. Now we're going to get to a couple more real, bigger scope examples. So one of them was in IC Tech this year. Well, okay, I'm going to give you guys some inside baseball on how the employee engagement survey works from the leadership perspective. Okay, you go out, we just do the employee engagement survey. The leaders spend the next couple months sweating. Oh my God, what is it going to say? And then when the survey comes in, we go behind closed doors and we look at a PowerPoint from HR and we're like, here's the 3 things we're doing well. Let's focus all our effort on the things we're doing terrible, right? So then we focus our effort on that and then we create focus groups and action plans and blah, blah, blah. So we decided, sound familiar? Of course. So we decided, every organization does this. We decided to do something different in IC Tech this year. We said, okay, you know what? We have this thing called the promise statement. Okay, the promise statement was this beautiful value statement that a bunch of leaders put together that nobody ever talked about again. Also something that's very familiar, right? So we said, okay, you know what? What if we did this instead? What if we, because there's great stuff in that promise statement, man. It's like it shouldn't be just collecting dust on some PowerPoint or on a wall somewhere. We should be looking at ways to bring it to life. So what if we engaged people by actually engaging them in shaping our collective future together? So what we did was we said, okay, we're going to bring a bunch of people together and we're going to invite them to help us design ways to bring the values that are inherent in this promise statement to life. So here's what we did. We brought 30 people together. And the first session was all about understanding what's the best of the past, the best of the present, and the best of the future. So 3 questions hey, even though you may have never seen this promise statement before, there's some good stuff in there. So just read it and reflect on it. And where's the time in the last 12 months where you've seen the values that are present in this promise statement being lived in a way that help produce a meaningful outcome? And ask some questions about that. And then, hey, what on your team right now, what are some things that are happening that are in alignment with these values? What are 2 or 3 strengths you see or things that are happening that tell you that your team is working in a way that's in alignment with these values? And then the last question was, if we were to look 12 months in the future and these values formed the very fabric of our culture, they guided how we interacted with one another, how we worked, the conversations that we had, what would that look like? What would we be seeing, hearing, and feeling that told us that that had come true? And through some facilitation work and some exercises, what emerged from that were 3 main things. People wanted a mentoring program. They wanted they wanted an enhanced recognition program, which is, something a little more meaningful than here's a Tim Hortons gift card. And they wanted time allocation to be able to develop themselves personally and professionally. So then what we did was we brought about 40 people together and we said, now we're going to design ways to bring these 3 concepts to life. So in training room A, we had 40 people or maybe 30 people, some people that were remote. And we did this brainstorming session. It was a very specific way to brainstorm. And by the end of it, we had 250 ideas on the wall. It was crazy. And then we voted. What are the ideas that we feel the best about? Because this work is also about it's all about self-determination. It's not somebody telling you what you're going to do all the time. It's about following the energy of the collective, of the group. So all the ideas, then we voted on the ones that we felt the most passionate about. And then we picked ideas, and then we designed prototypes to bring them to life. And then the last thing we did was we had groups come together, and we said, here's our prototypes for these ideas. And then the leaders and the representatives of the group work together to start bringing those ideas to life. Okay, so a very different way of doing employee engagement. And again, engaging people by actually engaging them in shaping their future. And lastly, I want to give you an example that happened with our team, my own team recently. So I have one of the teams I lead is very young. Okay, so they're software developers. Software developers, for anybody in here that's not a software developer, perhaps you love one, they really geek out about the code they write, right? Obviously. But nobody else cares about that. No one cares about that. And I say this as a former software developer. So what was happening was this team, we had a real opportunity to level up how we communicate with and serve our customers. So we were doing some things like not communicating when we said we were going to, missing some deadlines as it relates to that stuff. And so what we did instead was, here's the broken to fixed way of thinking about this. Okay, we are not communicating all the time when we say we're going to, so here's what's going to happen. We're going to put like some communication plan in place, maybe we'll do some workflow or something, and then we're going to make sure that we communicate on time. Yeah, that is a way of getting better, but we decided to do something very different. Just last week actually, we brought our customers, the entire team, so 20-something people. I invited a couple people from some different teams to their voices, so we could have as many voices in the room as possible, because this approach is inclusive and it invites diverse opinions. But we also invited our customers into the room with us. Okay, and so the first thing we did, and the idea was, we want to co-create what exceptional customer service looks like, and we want to do that together. They eagerly attended because number one, they were happy. Number one, they wanted better customer service. And number two, they were happy to be invited. So the first thing we asked was, what is it about helping to shape and elevate how we deliver customer service that gives you a sense of hope and optimism for the future? And why is exceptional customer service important for your team? Why is it important for the relationship between our teams? And why is it important for Canada Life? And the answers that people gave were beautiful. One person said, because being able to consistently provide exceptional customer service makes your work more fulfilling and meaningful, right? So as we listen to these stories, people are connecting to a higher sense of purpose about why this is important than when we walked in there. So the next thing we did was we got them to pair up and we got them to interview one another, okay? Ask 2 questions. Reflect on a positive moment in time, a high point story, or an empowering example where you witnessed or were part of an exceptional customer service experience that deepened the connection and loyalty to that team, brand, company, or organization. So it doesn't have to be here. You can draw in wisdom and high point experiences from anywhere. So share the story. What were the key aspects of this experience that contributed to making it exceptional? And what are 2 or 3 words or phrases that best describe how you felt as a customer during and after this experience? And second question is, no matter how much we elevate our ability to serve our customers, what are 2 or 3 strengths or capabilities or experiences that we currently provide to our customers that make it easy for them to enjoy working with us? And what are you seeing, hearing, and feeling that tells you that these ones that you picked are particularly important? So we pair them up. They're actually interviewing each other about this stuff. And you can watch the energy in the room. The room is filled with stories, but people are positive and they are engaged and they're asking each other questions. And through that whole process, they are learning about what it is that creates exceptional customer service. And so what ended up happening as a result of that is we go through a little exercise and we ended up with 3 principles that when these principles are present, exceptional customer service happens. The first one is we go above and beyond for the customers we serve. The second one is candor. We communicate openly, honestly, and accurately. And trust, we do what we say always. You'll notice that there's nothing in there about the code we write. Nothing. It's all about this is what creates exceptional customer service. Now, the next step was, this is all great and interesting. What the hell do you do with this? So what we did was we broke into groups with our customers into 3 groups, and we said, okay, for each of these principles, each group is going to identify 1 commitment that we can make to an actionable, measurable commitment that we can make to bring this principle to life. Okay, so we spent about 20, 30 minutes or so doing that. And by the end of it, we have these actionable commitments that we've developed in harmony with our customers. And so the end result of that was we created the Promise Tracker. Okay, the Promise Tracker was based on the commitments that based on the principles that we identified as critical. Here's the commitments that we can make to bring those principles to life. And so we have, we'll make this part of our, cadence of commitment meetings and all that kind of stuff. But very simple. Our standing promises, the promises we're going to do every week, a little check mark that says we did it, and then our promises that are specific for the week. So here's the thing. That is the difference between going from broken to fixed, which is, well, we'll make a schedule for when we communicate, to going from broken to strength-based innovation. which is this took us way further in our relationship with our customers than if we had been focused on only on what was wrong. And our customers were freaking happy at the end of it, because not only did they have a deeper sense of belief in our commitment to them, but it mattered to them that they were invited into the room to be able to participate in this process. So I'm going to talk just briefly about operating spirits. Okay, so we tend to operate in the spirit of advocacy, which means I have an opinion, you're going to hear about it. Okay, so typically, how many of these types of interactions have you had? I state my opinion, you state yours. I state mine, you state yours. I state mine, you state yours. I hate you. Right? That's how it goes. So that's advocacy, walking around advocating for your own point of view. I'm going to suggest that a much more powerful operating spirit is a spirit of inquiry, which is asking better questions, staying curious at all times. Curiosity is the opposite of anger. The moment you become mad about something is the moment you lose all sense of curiosity. Always stay in curiosity. There's always a great question you can ask. So often the best question you can ask yourself is, what's the best question I could ask right now? So for example, we had when we're doing this employee engagement thing, and we have the staff, I hate that word, but we have the people involved in doing the work. This is kind of new here. Like, it's not happening top down, right? It's a bunch of people who typically don't feel empowered, trying to change the culture. So while it's amazing, there are some moments of frustration, obviously, right? And sometimes the frustration happens when people have different points of view, or they have different beliefs about other people's points of view. So in this case, in this situation, we had one of these moments, and I never get frustrated, because an organization is a living system. It's like a mystery, right? So whenever something that happens that causes me a sense of frustration, I immediately reframe that and say, what question could I ask to find out more? Or what question could I ask to help me be more effective? Maybe it's learning about somebody else's point of view. Maybe it's learning about somebody else's incentives, right? And why they are motivated to do the things they do. So instead of judging, just ask better questions. It makes all the difference. So here's a couple questions to ask. So I won't go into these too much, but I have given Dave a list of generative questions. I think they're going to attach it somewhere. So if you ever want to look at those, they're amazing questions to open up a team meeting with, or to explore with your teams what are working well. But as a leader, imagine asking somebody on your team this. If I was supporting you in exactly the way you needed to perform at your best, what would I be doing? Imagine being asked that by somebody. What happened that inspired you this week, and what's something important we might learn from it? If you have a weekly team meeting, imagine asking just a simple question like that at the beginning, and then creating the space for people to answer it. How might we best work together to get this done in a way that feels great for both of us? What can I ask to learn more about what's happening here? So just some questions. Again, I got a much bigger list that will be posted somewhere. I don't know where. Here's the thing, okay? So as I said at the beginning, so I know in an organization as big as Canada Life that everybody can feel like a cog in the machine, and sometimes my voice doesn't matter. It matters. Every single person in here is immensely powerful, and it happens one conversation at a time. Okay, but the thing is, together we are infinitely powerful. So if we, again, create psychological safety, if we ask the questions that unlock group genius, and we rapidly design ways to bring that group genius to life, and we do it continually, what is possible? Anything is possible. Absolutely anything is possible. And lastly, positivity always wins. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Jason. That's powerful stuff, isn't it? So we have some questions. Jason, why don't you go through them? Sorry for those in Toronto. And I'll repeat my thanks to Jason for another excellent presentation. And now it's time for questions. So we already have some up on the screen. Jason, go for it.
Okay, so appreciative inquiry is very much in line with the principles of servant leadership. Are there any plans to develop trained leaders in this regard? Actually, funny you should say that. So Miranda Davis is in here. So we are actually going to do in operations and customer service next month, in about 3 weeks, we're going to kick off a leadership training program that for maybe 10 or 12 leaders in that organization that is built around these principles. And what's cool about that is it's not going to be an event. It's going to be completely experiential, and it's going to be done over time. So as we learn and teach people these concepts, they're going to learn it in a completely experiential way, and then they're going to go do it with their teams. And that's going to create great discomfort, and it's going to create an amazing opportunity to learn together over time. And what will be cool is the very first thing that we are going to do when this group of people comes together is we are going to connect to a shared purpose. Why is what we are doing here together, why does it matter? And everything that we do will follow that transcendent purpose, but that will take a group of strangers and immediately turn them into a team. So it's going to be a really, I'm really optimistic that it's going to blow up, typical corporate training forever and ever, which I think will be a wonderful side benefit. What if you're so far down the hole that there's nothing positive to build on? I don't know what that means, to be honest with you. I think there's always something positive to build on. I think your ability, here's the thing, we get stuck in the same negative narrative that we've been saying forever, right? And so it can be very, very hard to think of a different way to do, like a different way of going about this. But sometimes it's as simple as asking the question, you know what would I love to see instead? Instead of constantly focusing on what we don't want, focus instead on what it is that you do want. And you know what? It could be that you're on a team with a leader who's basically hopeless, right? Who is just a nabob of negativity or whatever. That could be true, but that does not stop you from using every opportunity that you have to look for strengths and reframe that negativity into a positive opportunity. I was in a meeting a couple of weeks ago, maybe it was a couple of months ago actually, and it was a very typical meeting. Get a bunch of people in the room. Somebody goes in, they have this great idea, and all of a sudden, like basically immediately, it starts with, "Well, we tried this before; it's not going to work. Oh, what about this? Oh, here's an obstacle. Let's talk about that." Blah blah blah. And I can watch the leader of this meeting, who's becoming increasingly crestfallen about what's happening here. We've all led meetings like this where it's like completely going off the rails and you're like, I have no idea how to get this thing back right now. And I feel like a failure as a leader, and boy, this sucks, right? So in that meeting, all I asked was, so what would you love to see instead? And two things happened. One was people went, that's a good question. What would we love to see instead? And the second thing was, you know what? Thinking about what we would love to see instead feels a lot better than complaining about the same things we've been complaining about for the last 3 years, right? So it can literally be that simple. So that I actually just reject the entire premise. I don't know if I'm supposed to do that as a speaker, but I reject the entire premise of that question. Next. Love the concepts talked about today, but how do we keep shared purpose and aspirations from being deflated by our organization's inevitable funding brick wall? Okay. So there's so many ways where you can use this work. So using this work might not magically make funding appear, but what it might do is it might open your leaders' minds, or whoever in your organization's mind needs to be open, about what else might be possible versus the way that we always think about things. Like this leadership mastermind, or this leadership training program, I'm not supposed to call it a mastermind, leadership training program that we're doing. It's the first of its kind, right? We pitched the idea. I'm so passionate about it that I can be somewhat convincing at times, and we're doing it. So that's great. It might be that we don't need, think of all of the things that you can do to jack up the level of positivity and co-creation, working together, that don't require any funding. Like, what if, for example, you got your team together and you defined a set of operating principles that you were going to live by that would help guide all of your interactions as a team? That customer service thing I talked to you about a few minutes ago, that didn't require any funding except for the Post-it notes, right? So there's tons and tons of opportunity. And I think sometimes the three most important questions we can ask ourselves, because when I see a question like this, what I think is people think really, really big about change, which is nice. But the bigger you tend to think, or sometimes the bigger you think, the more you can run into roadblocks like this. Sometimes I think the three most powerful questions you can ask when it comes to any change initiative are, what is the smallest thing I could actually do right now to make meaningful progress toward our vision? And then the next question is, like, what's smaller than that? And the next one is, what's smaller still? Those types of actions, those are what compound on each other. So many of those small actions, they don't require funding. You know, and what I told the employee engagement team that I'm working with, creating a mentoring program, you know, there's two ways to initiate change. One is to, you know, beg people to support you in making the change. The other one is to just get moving and make it so friggin' inevitable that it happens. That's the other way. And you know what? You might, or maybe it doesn't happen exactly the way you want, but by taking the initiative and creating that groundswell and moving forward, you're going to learn so much about yourself and about the organization in the process. So just start moving forward. Take it to the smallest level possible and take a step forward. What is your advice for learning more about AI and for me to use it more consistently and effectively? Let's grab a coffee. I would love that. It's my favorite thing to talk about. So no, there's lots of, I've given Dave, I mean, that's actually true. If you want to grab a coffee and talk about this, I would be happy to. Also, I've listed a list, there's a list of books that I recommend. And I think that we're going to do something. I suspect that this will continue to grow in the organization because it's too powerful. And when you tap into people's collective strengths, the way they come to life, this is another one of those things I was just talking about. It becomes inevitable. This, to me, this is the future of leadership, and this is the future of collaboration. So come talk to me, read the books, and then stay tuned because more and more of this is going to happen. AI seems to require that every member of the group be ready to be vulnerable. What if you have unwilling participants? Oh, that's a beautiful question. 100%. Psychological, no one's being vulnerable unless they feel psychologically safe, right? That's why, as any leader of a team or member of a team or somebody who is facilitating one of these sessions, it requires that you create psychological safety. That's why I get up here and tell that story about myself, about how I was a raging alcoholic for 10 years, right? Because people stand up here and they go, geez, you know what? And this is what always happens. People are going to come up to me afterwards and they're going to share their stories with me because they know I'm not going to judge them, right? So if you want to create psychological safety, be the person that goes first. That's what I would say. Every single one of us has struggled. Every single one of us has screwed up. Every single one of us has been full of fear and self-doubt. So why don't you just be the person that goes first? And that is how you create psychological safety. If you get a group of people doing that together and you're not waiting for a leader, everything will change about how your team interacts with each other and how they perform. Done? All right. Thanks everyone.